Stellar Blade's kind of phenomenal. Don't know if you played the demo. In fact, I know you have not. You're waiting for the full course.
I'm so excited for the full course that I don't even want to have an appetizer of it. You know what I mean? But I'm excited to hear you talk about it because I've been hype for this game for a little while. I think the combat looks absolutely sick, but you've actually played it, and does it live up to the hype?
Yeah, I've only played the demo, so it is the thing that's available for a lot of people. Came out on Friday or Saturday, most recently, and it's, I kind of was a bit worried this was going to be too much of a Souls game. Like, I know that Shift Up, the developers, were saying that they were massively inspired by Nier, and they wanted a bit more of that vibe, and it's not, you don't realize how much of a vibe Nier Automata was. I know that game's from 2017, which is 7 years ago at this point, but that game, when you go into Stellar Blade, it's like, it's the music, it's the general feel of exploring this dilapidated environment. Reminded me a lot of Darksiders, which is a franchise no one ever shouts out, but that whole idea of a society used to be here, it was wiped out, and now there are crazy future beings exploring everything and doing acrobatics and fighting each other and whatever. That Darksiders 3 most recently did that, and I just want more Darksiders, to be honest, but I do like that vibe. And yeah, the combat, though, for as much as I thought it was going to entirely be an over-shoulder Souls game, that is one way to play it, but you can just de-lock and play it a lot more like Nier, where it's more like a platinum hack and slash game. It depends on how formidable the particular enemy in front of you is. There's one bit in the demo where you get mobbed by like 8 people, all 8 creatures all at once. So you're almost more encouraged in that case to try like hacking in various directions and stuff like that. But the moves that you've got are just so much more fun than a standard Souls game in regards to how over the top they are. Like lots of flips, lots of ridiculous stuff, lots of quick time events, or occasional quick time events in boss fights, and just a general approach of just giving you flair. Ooh. Like, just obviously the game is so, we need a term for it, sex forward. It needs a term for just, we've got a ridiculously attractive main character, and we're just leaning so much into that. It's all over the marketing. You've got the devs and the CEO guy saying he absolutely loves that stuff, and you can make the character half naked in the demo if you want. Like, you can just you can go for that stuff as much as you want. And I think it's super easy to therefore assume that the rest of the game wouldn't have any substance to it. That which was something that was thought about, something like Lollipop Chainsaw back in the day, because it was just so over the top, and look how sexy this character is, that there's nothing else to it. Not the case back then, not the case with Stellar Blade whatsoever, and that's good.
I was going to ask, you've already mentioned Platinum Games, so I'm guessing this game, with that in mind, sort of errs on the Bayonetta side of things,
it's
maybe in terms of the presentation at least, not in terms of the combat.
Because I hate like trying to think of the bucket it would go in. It probably would go in the Souls bucket, but because it's so acrobatic and kinetic and it moves so well, it did remind me of Metal Gear Rising quite a lot. Like Metal Gear Rising mixed with Nier, mixed with Sekiro's parry mechanic, where if you get the parry at the right time, you'll deflect it almost entirely. They have like a stagger gauge and stuff like that.
That's what I was going to ask, man, because everyone in the previews before the demo came out was comparing it to Sekiro and saying how much of a focus there was on that parry mechanic and that gameplay loop. And you just said that is a way to play it, but how integral to the experience is that? Because
I think for me, I found the lock-on to be a bit floaty. Like, it wasn't as like diehard, you are fighting this dude in front of you as like a Souls game is. So it made me not want to associate it with that too much. Like, you could lock on in Metal Gear Rising, you can lock on in Nier, but it's not as making you fight like a Souls game. However, when you're doing the boss fights, that's when the Souls stuff comes in. Where you're sort of like up close fighting them, parrying, and then getting some distance because they're doing a charge attack and they're going to throw a bunch of projectiles at you or whatever. I just think it walks a nice line between the various modern action feels. And to me, as someone who is so dog done with the Souls formula, and the Souls feel, I get that it's massively popular, but I've just played too many of them and I'm sick of it. I wasn't too bothered about this, but I was like, I might as well play it anyway, because the demo's out, and then being so pleasantly surprised that there is this wider feel to it, where it does have, it has a foot in what I would say is the Metal Gear Rising action camp, where like you're fighting a boss and all of a sudden it's a quick time event, or you're doing these really cool finishers and like things like that.
One of the coolest games of all time, by the way, Metal Gear Rising.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. But yeah, I think we're at a really cool point with the Soul-style genre, because, I love that formula. I will play every single game that From Software puts out. I'll play all of the imitators, even if they have 10% of the budget. I think Thymesia was a really great one.
I was trying to think of that one. Yeah. The one with the big mask.
Yeah. I even liked, I've forgotten its name, so I can't like it that much. There's a game where every time you get killed, you sort of get thrown out of your body and your body turns to stone. Completely forgotten it, but I really enjoyed it. Played that through to completion. Oh
my God, that's the one where you can tank the hit. You can hold the button, you can tank it when you're getting hit and hit back. Yeah, I
completely
forget.
forgot.
No, yeah.
Someone will say.
Someone will say.
Will tweet us or say in the comments or whatever. But the point is, I think it's cool that we've seen an evolution of it recently. Where it's gone a little bit more accessible and a little bit more mainstream, where the ethos of From Software games remain, but you have that maybe flexibility in terms of difficulty, and you have that focus on fast-paced combat and over-the-top combat. You know, I think of Stellar Blade, I think of Star Wars Jedi Survivor, I think of Rise of the Ronin just last month. All of these games that are absolutely indebted to Souls, but don't really play like Souls games.
No, Jedi Survivor is a really good comparison, or Fallen Order, where it's like you can see the Souls DNA, you can feel it when you lock on, you fight a boss, you fight some sort of formidable opponent one-on-one, but overall you're not necessarily thinking in the same mindset as you would in a Souls game.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just to say that, and also like on the protagonist side, like you can't get away from the fact, obviously, like I think it's Sun Jun is the South Korean model that was the main character was based on, but then Eve in the game is even more voluptuous, more over the top. Like personally, I have zero problem with that, whatever. But in regards to that, there's an assumption that she would be an extremely threadbare surface level character, and she's not. Like I actually really like the stakes that are present in the opening. It reminds me a little bit of Ocarina of Time, and I think that as much as there's, like I said, absolutely an assumption that it's a sexy old game with nothing else to it. It's not. Like this is only the second game from these devs, and it's hilarious if you want to go down the sex horn route. Their first game was like a mobile game just full of large-chested waifus. If you're into that kind of thing, and they seem to have taken all the money from that mobile game and then just gone completely out there with this
I never
thing.
knew that's where they originated. I didn't know they were only 2 games into.
Well, I was like, where have they come from? They're called Shift Up, and they're a South Korean dev, and Sony apparently helped get this thing over the finish line. And that's another side of it, is that the PS5 tech in here, it feels like a PS5 showcase, even though it's not a first-party title. But it does that thing that Astrobot does, where if you're standing in the rain, you can feel the pitter-patter in the controller.
Oh, I love that.
And I was like, that's literally Sony's devs, Sony's engineers going, this is how you do this. If it's raining, do that. And so it ends up burning through the DualSense in like half an hour, because everything has its own shutter and all that kind of stuff, which is great. But still, it feels like a really good PS5 exclusive. It is PS5 exclusive, but it feels like a first-party showcase. And that, coupled with how well it runs, like, you know, butter smooth frame rate, etc. It's just really nice. Like I did a tweet just saying how much I was blown away by it, and I wasn't expecting that to take off so much. But I think a lot of people are curious about it. Like a lot of people will have seen the marketing. Like you've seen the main character, you're curious if there's more to it, and then realizing that actually the fundamentals are stellar. Blade. And then there's like a whole training area in the demo where you can fight an optional boss and you can get a taste for what harder combat's going to be like. I'm really impressed by it. And like I said, I thought I was done with Souls stuff, and I am, but like there's enough to this where like I'm actually looking forward to getting stuck in, and I guess I'll see what the difficulty curve feels like, because it feels a lot more manageable than your standard Souls game.
I'm really pleased to hear about the characterization and sort of the tone of the entire story, because when you make Nier comparisons, which like you said, a lot of the developers have made, saying they're inspired by that franchise, and Nier Automata especially, like Nier is more than just the look, it's more than just the combat, it's more than even just the story itself. It's about a vibe, right? It's about a sort of existential vibe that you get from juxtaposing those different elements of it. So I want that to remain for this.
Yes.
Because like you said, the idea of having this sort of future world built over the remains of a previous one, that's so cool. And that has so much, I don't know, potential to comment on humanity's repeated mistakes or whatever it is. And I'm sure, I'm not saying I want like a Stalker-esque, you know, dense narrative from this, talking about the film there, but I'd like it if they are taking from Nier in more ways than just the combat, in more ways than just the overall look. Yeah,
like thematically, there are some similarities. I'm going to keep it vague because people can go experience the story for themselves. But like, that whole idea of the portrayal of like a female body or something in Nier, like in Nier's case, in Nier Automata's case, seem to be using it as a general comment on the idea of androids aping humanity. But then in real life, you had creator Yoko Taro just say he's just into really sexy looking women. I was like, okay, cool.
At least he's honest about it.
At least he's honest about it. And obviously Nier Automata Automata, the character of 2B is like pretty iconic for her skirt being blown off.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like a whole look. Like entire figures you could buy like that. So I think it's going to be a similar thing in Stellar Blade where the fundamentals are solid. And I think that's going to be a whole discourse for the rest of the year of that idea of trying to look to the worthwhile components. Not that something being sexually attractive isn't worthwhile, obviously, but there's a whole side of the game that can stand alone without it needing to be sold on TNA.
I think it was it Gene Park who tweeted out the other day where he was like, there's been too much discourse around games this year. Every game, no matter how innocuous it may seem,
it needs to be a full-on thesis.
Absolutely crazy. And I feel like, Stellar Blade hopefully won't be another one of those, but after Dragon's Dogma 2 and how wrong I was about that and its microtransactions, I just don't know anymore. I can't trust my own instincts because every big game comes with absolutely an insane amount of intensity.
Yeah, and I think that's, as a wider conversation, is interesting because you want the art that you consume to be as worthwhile as your intellect going in or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's super easy to be like, I mean, I love a whole variety of different things, but I think it's super easy to get lost in that and be like, oh, is this actually worth my time? Is this actually pandering to like an older, more outdated version of myself or whatever it is? And when something is so overtly sexual like Stellar Blade, then it obviously gets caught up in that discourse and it's unavoidable. Like the devs have completely stayed into it.
Yeah.
It's not like the game doesn't have jiggle physics. But look, I was a Dead or Alive 2 fan myself. And so, like I said, I think that stuff is all present and correct, but it doesn't overshadow the fundamentals. It doesn't overshadow the combat, the unlocks, the progression, etc. So thankfully, it's a full package, no pun intended.
Very, very good.
Thank you.
I'm pleased it's demoing well. I'm pleased to see everyone turning their heads if they were naysayers and saying it's the real deal. I just hope that it can sustain that momentum across an entire big game. You know what I mean? Because it feels like this thing's going to be chunky. It feels like we're going to be spending tens of hours into it, probably. And after the year we've had where there have been so many huge, great games already released, like I said, Dragon's Dogma 2 and Rise of the Ronin just last month, Final Fantasy before then. There's a lot of competition, but you mentioned it being this PlayStation 5 showcase, and I think Sony, in a way, have been very suave in their second-party relationships this year. They've not had much, and they haven't got anything really announced from the first-party studios for this year. It's looking like Wolverine won't be ready until 2025, but they've relied really well on these second-party relationships. Like I said, Final Fantasy VII, Stellar Blade now, which is getting all of these plaudits and this buzz pre-release. And I'm just fascinated to see whether people come out of this year saying that was a good year for PlayStation. It'll all be based on this outside the first-party ecosystem.
Well, second and third party have bailed out console manufacturers for as long as time, but at the same time, something like Stellar Blade, it's so immediately visually impressive. Like it's so stylistic and cinematic when you're in combat. Like it's easy to be wowed by it. That's why I kind of thought of the whole PS5 powerhouse thing. And then you take a minute and you realize that the rain is coming through in the controller, and there are really unique DualSense features to it. Which things like that, you want a game to show off what the console can do. And I think Sony themselves have kind of failed at doing that. Or not done it as consistently as they could have, let's say. So when something like this comes along that is ostensibly an out of nowhere, like we've seen it for a little while, it's been in trailers and stuff, but then getting hands-on with it, and it does seem promising. And hopefully, as long as they don't whiff the launch day, like in theory, the performance at launch shouldn't be worse than the vertical slice demo they've given us.
Yeah.
So for once, you'd actually get a technically impressive game at launch, which in the current era is like hardly ever the case.
Hey, it's absolutely true, and I'm kind of not holding my breath because again, Dragon's Dogma 2, a game I absolutely love, with performance issues out the ass. And that has been the case for a lot of big titles over the past few years. Again, Jedi Survivor, a game I loved, performance issues out the wazoo, unforgivable in many regards. And I think it was John Lineman from Digital Foundry who was saying before release, Stellar Blade was a bit worrying in terms of how choppy it maybe looked. Can it really match the performance that a game like that needed? But everyone coming out of the demo is like, this thing is rock solid.
Yeah, which you'd hope isn't like a deceitful thing. But yeah, apparently the demo that a lot of press were given access to was an older build or something, the one that's gone to the public.
Right.
Something like that, where there's a disparity between what people got hands-on with on the press side versus the public. And you would just hope that they haven't been polishing up a vertical slice separately. I just hope that it works out. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff here. I love a new dev making their mark, and there's a lot of confidence with this thing. So hopefully it comes through.